Adoption of minutes.
Second.
Excellent. Were there any errors or omissions from the minutes? Seeing none, I'll assume those are unanimously received. Introduction of late items. I haven't heard of any, so we'll move right along and we'll get into our staff reports and presentations, starting with the development permit with variances 2101. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garvin.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Council. On the agenda is the return of this development variance permit. Council may recall at our last meeting, it was received and sent for notification. On the agenda is the results of that notification, and staff remain in support of the requested variances. If there's any questions, Mr. Seta is on the call.
Excellent, thanks very much. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question. It was an email received today from one of the neighboring folks in the neighboring buildings asking about the impact of shadowing on their solar panels. And I was just wondering, how do we assess that? Do we have a policy that any particular standard as to what shadowing of solar panels we allow? And just wondering how that's determined and how staff came to support the degree of shadowing that is being put forward here.
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. We don't have a policy in this regard. Mr. Seta may speak to that. The orientation of those buildings relative, I believe it's south-facing on those rooftops, so it shouldn't be a significant issue at the largest solar orientation, but maybe Mr. Seta can speak to that.
Yes, thank you. Through CEO to Mayor and Council, yes, there is no policy with respect to shadow. And however, the shadow studying the applicants conducted did indicate that winter time will have some impact due to the impact of the shadow regarding the building north side of the property. So it has a shadow impact, especially during the winter time, winter daytime.
Right, and you had a Paula?
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks for explaining that. I obviously, development staff have to balance the various benefits and drawbacks of any development, but it strikes me longer term as we hope to see more solar installed. I think for us to develop some sort of policy on how to balance these things off sounds like a wise direction long term, but I understand the staff have examined it. They've looked at the shadowing report and they've concluded that it sounds like that this is a reasonable degree of limitation of the shadowing on the solar panels. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Cole-Hamilton, I really appreciate your question. As we implement the OCP, we are going to have a variety of building heights and we want to encourage renewables, et cetera, on those buildings. So I think it is very important to develop that. And you're right, there are some trade-offs to be made. We do recall that this type of development in this corridor at that intensity is what we want to see. The adjacent building is at a slightly different height, et cetera, which they were permitted to do as well, pursuant to the existing zoning. And I think it will be very important as we move forward to balance these issues, because unless we develop ways to respond and support as we make these choices, it has the potential to become difficult. So I really appreciate you raising that question, and it's in our list of things that need to be developed through our implementation.
Excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the comments from the CAO. This isn't a rezoning. This is probably what was intended for this area, and so I'm happy to support these variances. Based on that, I'll move that development variance permit number 2101 for 1810 Riverside Lane. Council approve option 1 and development variance and issue development variance permit number 2101.
Excellent. Do I see any? Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I generally agree with the motion and appreciate the challenges for the building next door, particularly given their innovation in putting in solar. But as our CIO explains, trade-offs are involved, and in this case, the housing provided and development provided seems to be the priority. There is, however, another piece of feedback that we've received about increasing congestion on the street, and the suggestion that perhaps in future there be consideration to this being developed as one way. I'm just wondering if our staff have given any thought to that. What would be the criteria for doing something like that? We don't have much in the way of experience with one-way streets in our community, but I note in relation to our official community plan that there's also been some feedback suggested, which has come up at different times over the years, that some downtown streets be considered one-way. But my question is really about Riverside Lane, given its narrowness and the congestion that will increase with this development.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. I appreciate your question as well. At this time, we don't have any indication that we're going to go that route. We have a master transportation plan, and we have some criteria to go forward. Again, through the implementation of OCP and looking at supports for alternate transportation, et cetera, I think those are issues that we're going to tackle through the community. And if you think about the remaining lands within this corridor, there's probably a couple more properties that could potentially be developed. And it's something we'll have to give some consideration to. It is interesting from an urban form perspective. Some of the most amazing cities that are out there have exactly that problem, that there's a little bit of congestion and people need to go slower, and the roads are narrower, et cetera. So if you look at the trends in urban design, they're actually trying to go and sometimes create these types of situations. I don't want to suggest that we want to have failure, et cetera, on our roadways. But I just observe that some of the things that we want to encourage, as I said previously, will result in some of those trade-offs. Mr. Shaw's group, who looks after our transportation portfolio, will obviously look at those over time.
Thanks very much.
Excellent. And Councillor Morin.
Great. No, I just wanted to be on the record. I was going to ask a similar question, and I really appreciate your point about slowing traffic down. I guess just further to that, I mean, obviously, as we start to densify, I'm assuming that these transportation plans are taking that into consideration in terms of some of the comments we've had in a few developments lately, actually. You know, we're shifting things a bit from the past, and it's difficult for people to maybe visualize a different way. So I think the more communication we can have about that there is a plan, that we're not just putting in densification without having those considerations, I think is really important. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Morin. And are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. All right, next we've got the Consolidated Financial Plan. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor. I'll move that based on the March 14th, 2022 staff report entitled 2022 to 2026 Consolidated Financial Plan. Council endorse option 1 and approve the 2022 to 26 Consolidated Financial Plan, and that council directs staff to publish the 22 to 26 Consolidated Financial Plan to the city's website for public information and feedback from March 15th until March 31st.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any, let me pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Ms. Vajka is on the meeting, and she's going to do a very quick overview. And Before she starts, I just wanted to reiterate our thanks for all the hard work between staff and council. We're very much interested in hearing from the public on the go forward budget, which is aligned with our strategic objectives, asset management, making sure that we have prudent fiscal planning, and moving forward on a number of the items that are very important in our community that have come through the community plan and our other big picture strategies. So if Ms. Wyke has a short words for you.
Thank you through the CEO to Mayor and Council. So again, I want to echo the thank you to our Manager of Financial Planning, Annie Berard, and Business Analyst Cora Sawkins for preparing this very large document. I would also like to thank all the department managers and directors who collaborated in preparing this document, as well as our communications department for providing these beautiful photos and reviewing the financial plan. So the 5-year financial plan guides the management of the city's resources, revenues, and expenditures every year. It is shaped by council's strategic priorities and city's long-term asset management plans. Courtney's asset management bylaw sets guidelines for maintaining required levels of service in the most cost-effective manner through the management of assets for present and future users. The goal is to achieve the lowest long-term cost when making decisions. About half of city's total operating revenues are collected through taxation. Other sources include fees and charges, federal and provincial grants, and transfers from reserves and surplus, per the table on page 48 of the agenda. Balancing taxation levels and the desired service levels is a constant challenge. When costs increase from factors such as inflation, and for the benefit of the public, average CPI increase for the province of British Columbia for 2021 is estimated at 4.2%, and the forecast for 2022 is 4.5%. Then changes in statutory requirements, including new provincial sick days, as well as increasing minimum wage, and of course, increases to demand from growth in population. The city must either raise more revenue to provide the same level of service or reduce the level of service to maintain the same level of funding. Around half of the property taxes collected by the city of Courtney is collected on behalf of other agencies, such as the School District 71, Comox Valley Regional District, the Hospital District, and BC Assessment, and of course the library. The city has really no influence over how these funds are calculated or spent, other than council representation at the boards of the Comox Valley Regional District, the Hospital District, and the library. And council revisits and refines the future year projections every year during the budget process. On December 3rd, council has approved the sewer, water, and solid waste, capital and operating financial plans. And on February 28th, council has approved the general operating and general capital financial plans and a tax increase of 4.96%. And just to clarify, the increase in police protection costs due to the new contract between the federal government and RCMP members represents approximately half of the overall property tax increase in 2022. And this large document summarizes all the operating and capital spending for all funds for those years. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I appreciate the presentation. And I'm just looking around. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to finance staff for all the work involved in putting this together and the other departments as well. There's a lot of information in here that hopefully the general public who have concerns or interest in the budget will take the time to delve in and read. I know that it's difficult to get the message out about what exactly all these figures mean and what the justification is for the tax increase as such. And I'll just give us one example. We found last year when our tax increase was below 2%, which was actually probably lower than inflation at the time, but something that we wanted to do given the COVID circumstances. There were people who thought their taxes had gone up, not recognizing that the province the year before had basically paid their school taxes, which were now re-added to the budget. So the task of explaining the ins and outs of this is always a challenge. Nonetheless, there will be specific questions, and hopefully we can do a good job of providing the information. One of the things I wanted to ask about, I think the tables comparing Courtenay tax rates to other communities are really helpful. And they do show that we appear to be in line with municipalities around us of similar size. And but I was interested to see that our utility costs appear to be significantly higher than the provincial average. And I just wondered if perhaps staff could provide some type of an explanation for that.
Thank you, Councillor Healy, for the question. I can't find a page on within the document. However, about half, or 48, I believe, 0.6% of our utility costs are passed on from the Comox Valley Regional District, whether it's for bulk water purchases or sewer requisition, or the fees for tonnage that the city has to pay for at the dump. So, and then the rest obviously is the operating cost of running those services by city departments. So certainly, the costs passed on by the regional district have significant impact on the overall fees.
Right, and as we know, there are significant infrastructure improvements that are going on previously for water and now for sewer, which I'm sure are influencing those. It was just an interesting fact. The provincial average is shown as $850, while our costs are over 1,000, which puts us in line with Comox and Campbell River, slightly higher than Nanaimo and Port Alberni. But perhaps it's the infrastructure issue. I'm not sure, but it would be interesting to find out. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much for that. And next we have Councillor McCullough.
Thanks. Really great to see this come forward in the agenda tonight. I'm really happy with the work and want to thank you and your staff for all the work that went into it this year. I just had well, first of all, I wanted to say that I appreciate you highlighting that the RCMP contractual increases are representing basically half of what our increase is. And I think that's really important for the public to understand that we have a pretty significant expense that falls within the city that we really don't have a whole lot of control over. And my question relating to that is that I've always found that the fact that we summarize our cost drivers in our financial plan to be very helpful in terms of just summarizing how many costs we have that are often beyond our control. And I would really say that the RCMP contract falls into that. But it wasn't highlighted in the page or in the financial plan on page 24 of the plan or 56 of the agenda. It is mentioned in the policing paragraph, but I'm wondering if we could have that included or if it's too late to make that amendment.
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCollum. I think with the media release that's going to be happening tomorrow about the budget process, we're certainly highlighting that 2.5% of the 4.96 is related to policing costs. So hopefully that in itself, maybe it's going to be easier to identify than within this very large document. So
that makes good sense. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCollum. And actually the press release says, the first thing I noticed, I was like, we need that percentage in there to be really clear, not just the policing, but when we look at bylaw and stuff, I mean, we are talking about public safety. So even saying public safety as a whole is going to be more than that 2.5%. So to really be able to articulate that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thanks again, Renata, and to everyone who's worked on this. We've appreciated all the different opportunities through which you've laid it out at Lunch and Learns in previous meetings to make sure that we have a really full opportunity to assess this budget as it comes along. And now, as we sort of turn to the community and ask for their input, I think as the last two questions suggested, it's quite natural for people to look at neighboring communities as comparators to get a sense of how their community is doing. And as Councillor McCollum was saying, the RCMP budget accounts for half of our increase, and it also accounts for, I think my math was 30% of our total taxes taken in go straight out to pay our RCMP detachment. It's just under 8 million out of a total of 25 million that we take in. And I know that different communities of different sizes pay different portions of their RCMP cost. And because we are a larger community, we pay more than our neighbors in Comox and in Cumberland, and we pay an amount that's comparable, say, to Campbell River. Could you just outline what percentages the different communities, Comox, Courtney, and Cumberland, pay of their total RCMP bills, given that it is such a very, very large part of the overall expenses for any community?
Thank you, Councillor Cole-Hamilton. And at this point, as far as I know, Comox and Cumberland are not paying anything for RCMP costs because they haven't reached the population threshold. They're in their financial planning process. I know they're planning and they're setting the money aside that once they are responsible for the cost, so it won't be such a high shock to their taxpayers and huge property tax increase. Unfortunately, we are responsible for 90% of the costs, and we get the rest of it from the province. And in the coming weeks, I will be bringing the final policing budget to council for approval. So.
Thank you. I appreciate you putting that into context, given that's such an enormously large piece of our overall budget. It strikes me that given that, probably the better comparison rather than Comox and Cumberland perhaps is Campbell River, which I assume also pays 90% of its policing costs, being slightly larger than us, but comparable. And I was just noticing that their taxes are 25% higher than ours. Ours are just over 1,600 and theirs are 2,000. So I think that speaks to good financial management, and we can look at an apples to apples comparison like that and feel that that the budget is being well taken care of in Courtney. And I hope that members of the public, when sifting through all these numbers, will see those kind of important, those big pieces which help to set the scene. So thank you very much.
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Thank you. Through Mayor to Council, it is one thing that we need to keep our eye on. It is a constantly evolving cost to our community, and public health and safety is always an important item. The RCMP will be looking at staffing increases over the next few years to address both the growth of our communities and some of the changing circumstances that we experience. Inspector Curvers and I have been talking, and we'll be working with our financial services staff to develop a strategy to move forward. So the policing arrangement and costs won't be changing until the next population census, because municipalities below 5,000 don't pay between 5 and the next 50, they have the next threshold, and then we are unfortunately or fortunately at the largest threshold. But we do need to come together with a comprehensive approach, which the city has always used related to policing services, kind of in 5-year chunks. So we'll carry forward with that, and we'll be working with council and the subsequent councils that come forward during that period of time. But we have very good lines of communication with the RCMP leadership, and we've always been pretty diligent. And fortunately, even though this is a big portion of our budget, through due diligence in the past, we've put aside monies to address the obligations for the RCMP related to retro and all the things that have gone on related to their salary negotiations nationally. So I just wanted to provide that for council's information because it has been a topic of discussion over a number of years.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And I don't think, Councillor Helene again.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to comment on our policing costs. Policing services continue to be the source of controversy in some sectors. And of course, it's a very challenging role that they play. We certainly know if they're not there, we don't always like necessarily the way that they are there. But in general, I think our community is pretty supportive and relies on the policing services that we have. But we certainly do get suggestions from time to time about how police services could be delivered differently, particularly given the number of mental health issues that they are, along with all frontline workers, dealing with. I had the opportunity to meet with one of the watches at 7 o'clock one morning last week in relation to my role, my council role on the Community Justice Center board. And certainly some of the questions and comments we were hearing about related to their service to that population and the challenges therein. So I think that going forward, we may want to, in the next council term, those of us who are fortunate to be there, to consider how we address this and how we support the police to incorporate community agencies in their response to these situations, and also to basically back up the work that the city is doing to engage with the agencies in our community that provide services to this population. I think it's an important point that is worthy of further thought going forward. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Councillor Helene. And I think that might be it. So the motion's already on the floor. So I'll just call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. And next we have water and sewer master plans. Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Mayor and Council have had a preview of this information through some workshops that we've done. Mr. Shaw is going to introduce a number of staff who are going to work through this report with Council.
All right, Mr. Shaw.
Great, thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council, I'm pleased to present this report in partnership with my Public Works Services colleagues, Mr. Rod Armstrong, the Manager of Asset Management and Technical Services, and Mr. Chris Thompson, the Senior Asset Management Technologist within the Public Works Services Department. So just a brief overview until we get into the PowerPoint presentation. This report is presented to provide a summary of recently completed works relative to the water and sewer master plans. The master plans intend to identify deficiencies and develop capital programs to address current and future demands. Both the water and sewer master plans provide a review of the hydraulic performance of the City of Cordy's utility and identify efficiencies and recommendations for upgrades over the next 20 years. In terms of the report itself, it's important to note that the projects are grouped into projects related to historic, current, and projected performance issues, as well as opportunities for regional collaboration. With that, I now turn things over to Mr. Thompson, and he'll take us through a brief PowerPoint presentation to touch on the details of both the water and the sewer master plans.
Great, thank you, Kyle. And thank you through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So I'm here today to present the water and sewer master plans to you. The last water master plan was completed in 2003, and the last sanitary system plan was completed in 2012. So in the ensuing years, the city has seen significant growth and operational changes to both the water distribution system and the sanitary collection system. So as of 2021, the sanitary system includes 163 kilometers of both gravity mains and pressurized force mains, 11 sanitary lift stations, and a replacement cost of $259 million in 2021. Water system is 173 kilometers of water main, about 8,400 service connections, has 1 booster station and 7 pressure reducing valves, and a 2021 replacement cost of $233 million. So all of this information is mapped in the city's geographic information system, and this data is used in the hydraulic, sewer, and water modeling software. The hydraulic model is one of the core tools in the water and sewer master plan development. Utility data, along with existing and future population, is also loaded into the hydraulic models. And the software then runs a model engine under various conditions to determine deficiencies in the system. And knowing where these deficiencies exist, the modeling software can then be used to determine upgrade requirements. It should be noted that in 2019, the city purchased water and sewer modeling software and trained staff in the use of the software. So the city is now able to model scenarios and utilities at its own discretion and schedule in order to evaluate system options, which is fairly unique in a community of our size. Next, there we go. So jumping right into the recommendations coming out of the water master plan, they are including the water master plan capital projects in the annual city financial plans, updating the development cost charge DCC bylaw, continuing to work with the Comox Valley Regional District, the CVRD, regarding transmission and distribution system collaborations and information sharing to inform future infrastructure decisions. The CVRD, we understand, is starting their water master planning process shortly, so this is key. To implement a district metering zone program, to continue working with the Comox First Nation to support servicing agreements in place, and to integrate this plan with condition-based assessments being completed as part of the city's asset management program, as well as concurrent planning for other city infrastructure such as road renewal and the planning of other renewal or upgrading of other buried utilities. So what we see here is a map of the water distribution system. The city pipes are in blue, and those pink pipes are the transmission mains, the CVRD transmission mains, and the CVRD pipes as well. And what we see are what we see are projects listed to compensate for past performance issues, which include the North Courtney fire flow upgrades, the Braidwood Road renewal and upgrade project, as well as South Island Highway and Christie Parkway fire flow upgrades. And these projects here, or this project here, is the district metering zone program, and it deals with addressing existing system performance issues. And these projects listed here are projects related to address future system performance issues. I'm just going to go back one, sorry. This includes the Arden Road upgrade from Lake Trail to Cumberland Road, and an Arden Road upgrade from Cumberland Road to Brookfield Road. And these two projects wouldn't be necessary if the city collaborates with the regional district on the South Courtney transmission main project, which we see here. So these are regional collaboration projects to support the growth of the system, and it's the South Courtney secondary transmission main, a new PRV connection to the 87 zone, and South Courtney PRV and booster station upgrade. So the all-in 5-year total, so the short-term total for the city is between $2.95 and $3.4 million. And for regional collaboration, it ranges from $4.2 million to $7.6 million. So on average, for the next 5 years, it is recommended that the city spend between $0.59 to $0.68 million per year on city upgrades identified in this report. And it's important to note that a portion of this would be paid through DCC contributions. And in addition, it would be between 0.84 and 1.52 million per year on regional collaboration initiatives. And the Water Master Plan speaks to an average of $1.9 million per year. So the 5-year total that it would add up to is for city projects and regional collaboration projects is between 7.15 million and 11 million. Moving to the sewer master plan and the recommendations coming from that plan. Again, to include these master plan capital projects and annual city financial plans, updating the DCC bylaw, continuing to work with the Comox Valley Regional District regarding collection system collaborations and information sharing to inform future infrastructure decisions, identifying sources of inflow and infiltration, continuing to work with the Comox First Nation to support servicing agreements in place, and to integrate this plan with condition-based assessments being completed of the city with the city's as part of the city's asset management program, as well as concurrent planning for other city infrastructure such as roads and other buried utilities. So this is a map of the city's sanitary collection system, showing gravity mains and force mains in that reddish color. And then those orange mains are the CVRD large trunk mains for collection. And it also shows short-term projects in the short term that will compensate for past system performance issues. And those include the First Street lift station and force main renewal, the Puntledge Road catchment redirection, and the Mansfield lift station and force main. These projects here will compensate for short-term growth-related system performance issues. And they include the Arden Central Trunk running from Lake Trail Road to Cumberland Road, the Fitzgerald Trunk Sewer, as well as the Cliff Avenue Sewer Force Main and a Cliff Avenue Gravity Trunk Sewer, which will take flows from South Courtney through Cliff Avenue and take them to the regional pump station. And these projects here are related to medium-term growth-related system performance issues. They include a Veterans Memorial lift station and force main, sanitary servicing in the North Courtney area, an East Courtney lift station and force main, the final connection for the Arden North Trunk, and servicing in the South Courtney area. And of course, we have projects related to growth-related system performance issues, which are currently underway, and this is the Greenwood Trunk main and force main and lift station. So in the short term, the 5-year total is $15 million. On average then, it's recommended the city spend $3 million per year on upgrades to address hydraulic deficiencies identified in this report. And it's important to note that a portion of that would be paid through DCC contributions. So to summarize, looking forward, the next steps in this program for the city is a development cost charge bylaw update using these projects from the plans, a water and sewer user fee and frontage free rate review, it's a forthcoming asset management plan, an upgraded 5-year capital plan, and we will continue to use hydraulic models to review the water and sewer utility system performance. And that brings me to the end of this presentation.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. All right, and I see Councillor Hillian has a question or comment.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. Can you give any further breakdown of what you expect the DCC costs to cover versus what we'll need to cover otherwise? And also whether anticipated construction increases have been factored into these estimates?
Thank you, Councillor Hillian, through the CAO to Mayor and Council. It's difficult at this time to determine the exact DCC contributions without a fulsome analysis as part of the DCC cost charge bylaw update. With respect to the costs, these are all in 2021. These are 2021 costs, so it doesn't consider the escalation in costs through the years.
Thanks very much. I'm always impressed with how much work goes into these master plans and how much of our time we actually do spend talking about water and sewer, which is somewhat contrary to what some people think that we do. And coincidentally is the thing that most scared me off of being on council in the first place. Who would want to spend the majority of their time talking about waters and sewers? But it really is the nuts and bolts of what we provide as a city, and it's crucially important. So I appreciate all the work going into it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Healy. And next we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks so much for the report there, Chris. I just wanted to a lot of these expenses, there's sort of an asterisk with them, which talks about the replacement costs are guided by the level of risk the city is willing to accept. And I'm not here suggesting that we should be accepting any particular degree of risk, but I'm just wondering if you can clarify what sort of what the risks in terms of service interruption and cost and other detrimental impacts are that are being kind of weighed when you're making those assessments.
Thank you, Councillor Cole Hamilton, through the CIO to Mayor and Council. When we talk about risk, that sort of overlaps with the existing infrastructure that we have, and looking at the risk of running that infrastructure to beyond its service life, to the end of its service life, or beyond its engineered service life. So that sort of blends in with these master plans when we do talk about managing risk. In terms of growth, which is the bulk of these master plans, we are definitely concerned about underservicing our customers, or in terms of fire flow or water pressures, or the ability to service them with sewer. So it's definitely running the lowest risk possible in these sort of situations. In terms of growth is what we're aiming for, but in terms of asset renewal, we'll be discussing that more fulsome in the asset management plan that's coming in this year. Hopefully that answers your question.
That's very helpful. And I'm assuming, and this is probably the case, that obviously we're doing assessments as we go along of all these systems, because as we all know, sometimes things exceed their expected lifespan and sometimes they fail long before. And I imagine the way that we're quantifying that risk and balancing it is by doing an ongoing assessment and planning accordingly. Is that the case?
Yes, that's correct. We have done significant pipe inspections on our sewer system and our drainage system as well. So we are confident in the level of risk that we're taking, running those a little bit longer than their engineered service lives. With respect to the pressurized pipes, which make up our water system, we are aiming to definitely start or run them at a lower risk. We definitely don't want to see pipes bursting in that situation, and that also applies to pressurized sewer force mains as well.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Chris.
Excellent. And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks. And thanks for the report as well. I also had a question about just how we go forward with the DCC aspect of having these master plans in place. And I appreciate that we can't get necessarily into the numbers. And I wasn't sure if your answer also was, if you're saying we don't know what the DCC amounts will be, or if we don't have a sense of what proportion we're looking for those to cover, and especially when it comes to growth projects. Do we have like a policy that, or is it specific to each DCC project that we get a separate breakdown, or sorry, each project that qualifies for DCCs, are the proportions different from project to project?
Yes, thank you, Councillor McCollum. Through the CIO to Mayor and Council, that's correct. Each project is weighed specifically to, so we have we see a different benefit to the developer with respect to versus the benefit to the residents that on the system already. So, I'm not an expert on DCCs. However, a review through and an analysis of the how much these projects benefit, future growth versus the existing system will be part of that DCC bylaw. Quick analysis, however, the sewer system, most of those projects would be DCC eligible. They're definitely growth driven, and the water system as well. So there's a few projects in there which are related to just renewal and small upgrades to the existing infrastructure.
And then to kind of expand on why I'm thinking about this at this time is I do recall when we approved borrowing for Greenwood a number of years ago, I was quite surprised at how small the proportion of DCCs were that covered that project, given that it is identified as a necessary project to accommodate growth. And of course, now we're years past that, and that project was quite a bit more expensive than we first imagined. And I'm wondering if you have any insights into whether or not when we do our next round of DCC bylaws, if there are ways to kind of avoid those situations going forward, or if we're able to build contingencies in, or if it's a pretty limited process and we just basically follow a formula. Maybe you're not the person to answer to.
Maybe Mr. Garbutt.
Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you through the mayor to Councilor McCollum. Really appreciate your question on that. This is the first step, and then we do, as my colleague has advised, we need to build that total picture on DCCs, and then as that progresses and we understand what the private benefit is relative to the big picture benefit from the city, then we actually also have to understand and develop the rate with which there's an assist factor there. So the DCC process is actually quite complicated. And given the age of our DCC program, the list is deficient, the amounts are deficient. This master plan will help us redo that whole approach. We have already talked to the consulting firm who had done a lot of the background work for us. But in bringing forward an updated DCC list, there's extensive consultation that's required in order to do that. And really with the timing that we have, we're going to have to push that to our next council. But the fact these studies are now done, which helps us understand what the capital program looks in order to accommodate both the existing conditions and future conditions, is the absolute critical step to get that sorted out and right. Unfortunately, sometimes you get behind and you do miss out on the application of DCCs in that regard. And then also your total project list for DCCs establishes how much you want to collect in the first place. So this is a critical component. And unfortunately, in the case of the Greenwood Trunk, it wasn't well aligned. But I think it'll set us in a great stage to move forward.
Great, thanks for that info.
Excellent. And Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just, since being on council, I've just really begun to appreciate so much more these infrastructure projects and renewals, having been here for almost 59 years now. I know we kind of joked about how some of the replacements were probably from pipes that were put in when my grandpa was working for the city in the 60s or whatever. So I think, much like the rest of the budget, I think it's when you look at it as a whole, it just seems, big picture, it looks like, oh, that's a lot of money. But when you break it down into all these items that get done, and I think I'm hoping that some of the public will take a look in more detail at some of the projects that are underway. And I mean, we're looking at obviously growth in newer areas, but there's also the older areas of town that we really need to do work on and have that asset management plan going forward. And I think, we do forget that Courtney is getting older compared to some other communities, maybe not Cumberland, but anyway, I just appreciate all the work and all the planning and the asset management piece and the thoughtful way of looking at these projects and what needs to be done. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Councillor Morin. And one of the questions that I had kind of sparked a little bit by Councillor McCollum is, and really that fiscal snapshot that we're trying to plan for, and we, if we cast back and we look at how we see prices escalating, and when we're looking at those recommendations, whether or not we include either an automatic increase every year of CPI or something, or whether or not there be sort of regular updates in terms of those financial estimates to try to make sure that the amount we're saving for kind of gets us where we want to go. And I mean, the first project I dealt with was the water treatment facility, which we had all the money set aside for it, but then it ended up being about $100 million more. So, and kind of, that's just within the last 7 years. So I don't know if that makes sense, but just really how you deal with those escalating costs in terms of making sure you're putting the right amount of money away.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah. Mr. Garbett has his.
Oh, thanks. I just, that's the absolute critical component of a well-funded and well-organized DCC program, to make sure you update those projects on a regular basis. Very often in many communities, establish a list and go busily working away, and then they wonder why at some point there is a misalignment with that. Now, our asset management policy should assist with us upgrading and having a good information base, but it's going to be, when we have our new DCC program come forward, we're going to be, you're sometimes fortunate when you delay a little while, that will incorporate the best practice that's there. And that is making sure that you have a regularized inflationary analysis of those costs. And also the development community likes to know that, because they want to have DCC projects that are reflective of their DCC obligations, because they also have offsite works. And the more of the better that bylaw is that identifies DCC eligible projects, the more beneficial it is to the development community, so as they can apply their DCC obligations there. So updated DCC bylaw will address that, and then policy within the DCC structure itself to continuously upgrade those costs over time is best practice, and we'll certainly be incorporating that.
Okay, so rather than a CPI one, it would just be an actual real analysis or an updated analysis.
Again, DCCs themselves you have to be extremely accurate when you do that. I don't think, you have to get ministry authorization or review from those things. So just having automatic escalators, I'm not 100% sure that would pass the mustard, although my colleagues might be better informed than I am, but it is just good practice to be continuously updating that stuff. And it does, as I said, it aligns with our own asset management objectives and dovetails both with our development approvals program and then the other work that we're going to be doing. So I think it's really excited about the DCC bylaw update, key critical asset management and operational and financial planning component, as well as the OCP implementation.
And before you turn your mic off, one last question for a follow-up. My apologies, but so would that mean that those reviews would be baked into that DCC bylaw? So it would say every X number of years?
Yes.
Yep, perfect.
We have to be mindful of the implication for staff time, et cetera, but it's well worth the investment.
Yeah, and I think we're where we're at right now because we're kind of catching up, et cetera. So yeah, that's great. I don't see any further questions or comments, but having said that, there's Councillor Hillian.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, that based on the February 28th, 2022 staff report, water and sanitary sewer master plans, council approve option 1 and adopt the draft water master plan and sanitary sewer master plan as presented.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. We have had a good discussion. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. And next we have the City of Courtenay Memorial Bench Program. Move proceed. Yeah. Okay, we've been received. Okay, Councillor Hillian.
I wasn't sure if there was anything to receive, but I was actually prepared to make a motion in regards to this, if it's appropriate. And that was that we request a staff report on the possibilities of reinstituting the Memorial Bench program or an alternative process.
Excellent. And that's exactly what staff had written down on my piece of paper here. So, yeah.
And if I could speak to that, Mr. Mayor.
Just before we move along, I'm just going to dispense with the receipt motion just because that was put on the floor. I'll just assume that's unanimously and I'll give it right back to you.
Thank you. So I believe this comes about as a result of a request that came from a member of the public who had a particular interest in this. And in her correspondence, she correctly pointed out that we'd suspended the program several years ago. We had some extensive discussion at the time around the reasons for that, which related to maintenance and cost and such. But I don't think we took the second step, which was to, if we're not going to have memorial benches, what are we going to have instead? And I know there's been some discussion about the possibility of a memorial wall, for example, at the Civic Plaza, or some such other way for people to remember their loved ones. But I think given the time and the fact that nothing has been done, it's appropriate that we ask staff to have another look at this. If all the same issues are relevant, then I think it's incumbent upon us to come up with an alternative process. But it may be that there's some possibility of implementing this program. I'd like to say that at the same time, I hope staff can take a look at the resolution that council passed several years ago, which related to just an ordinary bench program, memorial or otherwise, to provide additional benches around the city for particularly our seniors and more vulnerable people when they're out for a walk and need to sit down and have a rest. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Helene. Appreciate that. And Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the motion of having staff have a look at this and look for a way to provide an avenue for members of the community to have a way to commemorate a family member. I did go back to our previous agendas and I tried to find the staff report that we made our decision around, and I had a hard time finding it. So perhaps it could also be shared with council, because I recall that we did have a fairly extensive discussion and there was a fairly solid rationale for why the program was suspended. So I wouldn't want to create more work unless there's, some factors that have changed now since we discussed it. It was a few years ago. But I do like the suggestion of looking at whether or not there are some other options. And so I'm happy to support the motion, but I also don't necessarily want to completely start that dialogue over if there isn't a lot that's changed since we last discussed it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Councillor McCollum. And yeah, I do recall that there, obviously was a couple of issues. One was subscription. There was a massive waiting list to begin with, and then really that sort of full life cycle cost of the bench, the maintenance and replacement, and how that complicates things for sure. Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for those comments, Councillors McCollum and Hillian. I had asked for this to come forward after the correspondence came in because it was a very long time ago that we were discussing this item, and I thought it would be good to refresh our memories. And as Councillor McCollum says, hopefully there will be that information that doesn't have to be rehashed. I guess being I don't know what the term is, the nostalgist in the room, and having been here for so long, I really do appreciate when citizens write in or call in and talk about those memories of being in a particular location and growing up in an area and really wanting to commemorate loved ones. We have so much influx in our communities with people moving in and out, and when you have someone who's lived in an area for a long time and have those those time and place connections. I think it is important to take a look at how we can help folks, preserve that in some way. And whether it's the bench program or something else, I'm looking forward to being able to revisit it and take a look. I know there's many other people out there who have asked about benches in the past, maybe haven't written in, but and certainly I like Councillor Hillian's idea as well, of having some respite areas for folks, because that is something that's also come up, where we don't have shade trees, et cetera, even just being able to sit down and have a little rest along the way, especially if we're trying to promote active transportation. So thank you.
Excellent. And yeah, thanks so much for bringing it forward, Wendy. When I spoke to the other Wendy who sent in the email, I was going to be racing off and asked her if she could send that in, just because she had articulated her argument quite well. And it's probably worth noting that this is the same person that led the creation of Sky Park next to the air park. So she is somebody who's been very involved and worked in other areas of town on behalf of Rotary, making these big playgrounds and stuff. And this seemed to be hopefully a logical extension. Okay, with that, sorry, Councillor Frisch.
Last minute, no, I just know some of the comments. I just wanted to point out that we are sort of dealing with two issues here, and I guess one report might be able to contemplate both those, but we have the commemorative aspect, and then of course we have this idea that we need more places for people who need a rest to stop and rest. So I imagine this will split off at some point, but look forward to seeing a report. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And with that, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. And that gets us up to council reports, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton. All right, Councillor Frisch.
Just quickly, Mayor, I was hoping to have minutes from my last Junction community meeting, and they haven't been adopted yet, so I wasn't able to do that, so I apologize. Thanks.
No, that's all right. That's fine. Councillor Hillian. Councillor McCullum. Councillor Warren. Okay, well, I'm going to be talking about you guys a little bit then. So I can start with March 2nd. We had the flag raising at City Hall, and we did have Councillor Warren and Councillor Cole Hamilton attended as well. So I want to appreciate Kevin from the public, who donated his Ukrainian flag to us while we source our own, so that we could have that flag raising. And on that same day, there was a celebration of life for Fran Prince, who Councillor Hillian spoke at our last council meeting about, and actually spoke on behalf of the city and the regional district, I think, at the actual celebration of life. And it was a great celebration of her life, I guess. Lots of laughs and getting to know her a little bit better. And lastly, on that day, I attended the Wounded Warriors run that was happening at 888 Wing. On March 4th, I attended the North Island College housing announcement, speaking about all the housing that's going to be coming in for students, and over $65 million grant from the province. So just an amazing addition to our community. Councillor McCollum went all the way up to the college for that event. So I appreciate you attending that as well. Looking forward, I think the timeline seemed crazy about how quickly they're going to be coming online, but great to see that happening. March 5th, there was the Comox Raleigh Stands with Ukraine event that happened at the Marina Park in Comox. And again, I believe there was about 1,000 people there. The park was absolutely filled up. I didn't see anybody else, but I was also very focused at the front there. And then on the weekend, on March 6th, there was the Vancouver Island Society for Adaptive Snow Sports Adaptive Awareness Day up at Mount Washington. That was really well attended as well. March 8th was the International Women's Day, which I actually attended Councillor Moran's event. So as I said, I was going to be talking mainly about you guys. And then last week, on March 11th, we had our leaders lunch with the mayor's chair and chief of Comox First Nation. So that's it. And with that, there's a resolution of council. Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that at the conclusion of the regular council meeting, council closed the meeting to the public pursuant to the following subsections of the community charter, 91I and 91K.
All right, any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, any opposed? That passes. And unfinished business. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So obviously this is from the delegation that came at the last meeting, and I'd just like to see if there's support and move that staff provide a report based on the issues brought to us at the last delegation about noise in the early mornings in downtown.
All right. And anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mary. I'm just wondering if obviously the request to provide a report makes sense, but I'm just wondering if staff can give us any preliminary indication of whether this has been looked into and whether we have some options that we can consider to solve this problem, which I think most of us recognized as worthy of some attention.
Thanks. Mr. Garvey.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. Staff have done a preliminary investigation. We have some competing priorities here. We have an extremely high level of service in the downtown, and that's been a priority for this council for a number of years to ensure that this important commercial node is clean and accessible, particularly during times of years when we have a number of leaves and the like there. So we, Mr. Shaw with his staff have looked at the current approach that we utilize, and we can come back to council and report back on potential options. This is somewhat of a level of service discussion. We have worked very closely with the BIA to make sure that we have a very inviting area. And we also have service requirements throughout the rest of the municipality to keep our areas clean and free of debris and et cetera on the roadway. There is some economies of scale. I don't know if that's exactly the right word to use, but in terms of the delivery of that service and the timing and the location that our vehicle and the operator leave our yard. But that's all something we can look at. It may be that we've understood this work and this is how we've done it. I think it's healthy to take and examine that. But we do have to make some trade-offs and prioritize. So staff are happy to look at this. I think it's going to be a good process. And as I said, I think it's healthy to look at these things. We have a number of operations that happen, and we will be downtown cleaning more with the Herbaloo, et cetera. And so we may need to adjust how we do business. And I really appreciate that when we get feedback from the public and council asks us to take a look at that we do that. So I can offer that.
And one of the things I think that may come back in this in terms of clarification is I think the frequency of the days that it was happening may have been overstated. So the frequency in which staff our workers are out there doing stuff, I don't think was as frequent. However, when it's that early in the morning, it may feel like it is that frequent because it is. I mean, that's why we're talking about it right now.
Thanks for that. If I could just make a further couple of comments. One of the essentials of good health is getting a decent night's sleep. And I think we all know from experience that we function much better when that's the case, and no less so for people living downtown. It's city policy to encourage more people to live downtown. You know, we had a fairly extensive process a few years ago where we talked about the desirability of buildings downtown that are multi-purpose. I believe we have the new building that's going in on the former Palace Theater lot that will be exactly that, commercial at street level and residential upstairs. So the challenges of early morning noise that disrupts people's sleep will increase. And My hope is that as we look at this, perhaps there are some compromises. I don't know whether there are sound abatement strategies that can be built in. I'm not sure whether electrification of our fleet, which is an ongoing process, might provide some options for quieter operation. But I also know that leaf blowers in general, which appears to be one of the functions that we're looking at here, are a major noise producer when they're privately owned in residential neighborhoods. And I think that increasingly we want to model as a city best practice around how to do these in both an environmentally sound and in a way that promotes population health. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian and Councillor Moore.
Well, as is often the case, Councillor Hillian said much what I was going to say, and that was just that we are having more, we're promoting residential downtown, and it's much like the other conversation around as we densify and sort of looking at trying to be proactive with those concerns that might come up as we do that and how we can offset some of those things. Perhaps looking at other communities that, have had similar situations to deal with and how, we did hear that there are several communities that have electric or have gotten rid of the leaf blowers altogether. So hopefully we can get that sorted out. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And Councillor Frisch.
Thanks again, Mayor, and thanks to staff for being willing to look into the issue. It sounds like, there might be some timing issues or some efficiencies with how we do work downtown. I would also note that living in downtown might include a piece of being, having a little bit of a noisier lifestyle when you live somewhere that's more vibrant. And so that might be something to look at as well. And there may also be some noise attenuation pieces in the building code that we might need to implement in our downtown. So thicker pane windows so that people who live in downtown are better separated from that noise. So lots of aspects to look at here. And I don't know that we'll be able to tackle them all in one report, but lots to talk about. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. All right, so we have a motion. Did that motion make sense? I'm just looking for nods. Yeah, perfect. All right. No further questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. And next we have housing agreement. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like to move that bylaw number 3062, housing agreement for 1600 Riverside Lane, bylaw number 362, 2022 be finally adopted.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. One last thing. All right, all those in favor? It's been adopted. There we go. All right. Thanks, everybody.